Okay, everybody, let us try to get started here. Now, you're probably going to be happy to know that this last section is going to go without slides. So we won't have any children's videos, no nothing. Okay, so let us begin, if we can get everybody back in here. All right, so this last talk is very hard, very difficult for me. There is nothing that a priest can say other than sorry if we have any victims here of the church scandal. There is nothing that I can say if you have been abused that can justify it, rationalize it, whatever it is that I'm going to say, please do not think that is my intention. I've given this talk, I think, 3 times, and every single time it arouses tons of emotion in people. Half the people, Father, this needs to be broadcast on EWTN, to other people saying, Father, how dare you? So this talk arouses a lot of emotion. But I need to preface it by saying it is not, please let me repeat, it is not my intent to ever try to justify or explain away any single case of abuse. These priests need to be removed, dealt with, and imprisoned even. There is no question that that is something that has to be done. The only reason that I'm bringing this up is because I am first and foremost an advocate of justice, and I use that term in quotes because God doesn't want us aiming for justice. It's not our job, it's his job to judge. But I am aiming for those priests to never hurt someone again. They need to be removed, they need to be dealt with, and this is not even an option, especially with young children. So there is nothing I can say to take away your pain. But what I want to say is I'm upset from both sides. I'm angry at those priests who are guilty, but I'm also angry at those who have falsely accused priests. And the reason I bring that up is because I'm very close with one of them who was. Thank the Lord, he's been completely exonerated. That shook me to the core. And I'm sorry if that comes out in my talk, but it scarred me. But I'm every bit as scarred on both directions. And you should be too. That's my only answer to somebody who's going to be upset with this talk. Because you should be upset for the victims, and you should be upset for those who have falsely accused priests. Because whether you want to acknowledge it or not, both are in existence. There are guilty priests, and there are innocent priests who have been accused. And I want to touch on both of them. All right, what is the problem here? Obviously pedophilia, right? Now the first thing I want to explain is this. Nobody in our culture would say that this is acceptable. Nobody. But you know what? This wasn't always the case. Do you know that it was a normal part of ancient Greece and Rome? It was a normal part. This was commonplace for men to have relations with boys between 12 and 18. Now don't be thinking, Father, are you going or that this should be okay? No. What I'm saying is, then came Jesus Christ. And everything changed. This was an accepted part of culture in Greece and Rome. Nobody questioned it. Then came Jesus. After him, Christianity rejected this common pagan practice of sexual relations with minors as a distortion of sexuality. The only reason there are laws against it today is because of the evangelization of the Catholic Church. That's the reason. As Christianity evangelized the pagan world, the acceptance of pedophilia disappeared. It was replaced by a widespread moral awareness, and anti-pedophilia laws followed on the books. The same was true for homosexuality, sexual slavery, abortion, and euthanasia. They were all accepted in the pagan world until Christianity. They became moral issues rather than accepted pagan practices because of the Catholic Church. So how ironic that it is the church that is being accused of the most immoral institution out there. Don't you find that a little ironic? That it set the moral standard, and yet we are the ones looked upon as the most immoral. And there are cases, and they need to be pointed out. They need to be highlighted, and they need to be addressed. This has happened because many in the church, clergy, priests, bishops, now cardinals, have lost their way and turned to sin. Now I'm going to rail on the priests. We are not to accept this. We are losing our morality because we are losing our Christian roots. We have accepted homosexuality in law because of the de-Christianization of our culture. Some priests, bishops, and now cardinals, at the very heart of the Catholic Church, are acting as willing agents of repaganization, undoing 2,000 years of church history. There's no excuse for this. Bishop Molino of Madison, he called this out. He said, quote, "In the specific situations we are talking about, deviant, sexual, almost exclusively homosexual acts by clerics, and about homosexual propositions and abuses by powerful priests, bishops, and cardinals. Their lust for power and their power of lust are intertwined." You ever hear that? It's true. Molino doesn't deny that there are some pedophile priests, but he says the problem is homosexuality. All studies show that 80% of abuse was homosexual and 90% was post-puberty. This is not pedophilia. The John Jay report, now again, I'm only quoting stats here. Do not shoot the messenger. The John Jay report was even more startling. Out of 4,329 priest offenders, guilty priests, 96 were pedophiles. That's 2%. Now, I don't care if it was 0.0001. That's too many. I am not making excuses because the number is a lot lower than any media portrays, that it is justified. I am not saying that. What I am saying is there's no excuse for it, there's no reason for it, but we need to look at this. Only 96 of 4,329 guilty priests were pedophiles. That's less than 2%. This percentage is way less than teachers and way less than the general population. You know what the general population percentage is? Over 3%, almost 4% are pedophiles. Most sex offenders, according to the report, are not celibate clergy. As I said, though, even one is too many. Even one. It's unexcusable, it's unacceptable, and we can't have even one. There's a guy that's been studying this for years named Dr. Fitzgibbons, and he said, quote, "In treating priests who have engaged in these acts, we have observed that these men, almost without exception, suffered from the denial of sin in their lives." Were you all here the other night when I said Pius XII said the greatest sin of the 20th century is the loss of the sense of sin? These guys Dr. Fitzgibbon said, don't even think they're sinning. Are you kidding me? Seriously? What are you doing in the priesthood? You know, I got a million faults a mile long, but ever thinking about touching a child, thank God, is not one of them. But I tell you what, I know I'm broken, and I beg God's mercy and forgiveness every single day. How these priests cannot do it is beyond me. But this is what they found. These priests rejected the church's teaching on sexual morality. This is what he said when they interviewed them. He said, we can't solve this sickness with a proper diagnosis because they don't acknowledge it. This is crazy. The proper diagnosis is found in the Bible, but they don't examine their conscience or accept the church's teaching on moral issues. This is the problem with those priests. Many don't even utilize the incredible gift of confession. I was blown away by that. When they reported that these priests were guilty that they interviewed, many of them don't even go to confession. Are you kidding? I'd never leave there. If you do this, you will lose the spiritual battle. The scandal is demonic. It's demonic. Father Robert Barron, he said, when we take our mind off the battle, like David did, we are consumed by the need for pleasure. Anybody remember what David did? What did David do? Remember the war was raging and he went back home to have a siesta, right? And he's just strolling around his upper deck and he looks out and who does he see? Bathsheba. What happens next? She's bathing. Send her up. What happens next? They have relations. He sinned. You know why? Robert Barron said because he took his eye off the fight. He took his eye off the fight and was consumed by the need for pleasure. He also, like me, got on these priests and called them Davids. He said these Davids who should have been fighting were napping and seeking pleasure. I get criticized all the time in my religious community because I don't sleep. I get about 3 hours a night, if you can't tell, right? And my only defense in that is, guys, there's time to nap all eternity. We can't nap now. There's no time. In the middle of the day, watching TV, napping, I don't get that concept as a priest. I don't get it. These Davids should have been fighting. Instead, we're napping, not caring for the sheep, but abusing the very sheep entrusted to them for their own pleasure. There's no excuse for a priest to do that. Wealth, pleasure, power can overtake us if we aren't careful. If you take your eye off the struggle, you will fall into these great sins. I think Father Robert Barron said that perfectly, do you not? There's no excuse for these actions of these priests. I am furious with these guilty priests. There is no question about that, and let me underscore that fact. But I'm also very upset with the good priests who have been falsely accused, because I know some. And I'm sorry, I'm speaking from emotion here, and I just told you, love is not an emotion, it's an act of the will. And I let my emotions get in there because I've watched and seen some accusations that we know, thank God, a couple of them were proven false, not in my community, but other priests that I know. I want to point out this Pennsylvania grand jury report. You all heard about it on the news, right? Well, let me shed some light on that. They called it grand jury, but you know what a grand jury is? Does anybody know what a grand jury is? It's not a jury. You guys know that, right? It's what? It's an interrogation room. The grand jury is not a jury, and there has been no cross-examinations or legal due process. None. Most priests mentioned are dead and never had a chance to defend themselves. I'm not saying that they're all innocent, of course not. I am not saying that. This Josh Shapiro, sorry, but I pray for the man, because what he done and has done is very serious. What are his motives for spending millions of dollars in resources on this when no convictions can even come out of it because these cases are too old? One priest that he brought out was born in 1896. It's not to help the public because most of these priests are dead or have been thrown out of the priesthood. Almost none of them remain in the priesthood. So what's your point? Well, the point of causing euphoria. Why? If the guilty priests are dead or out of the ministry, what's your motive? They're not going to hurt anybody. They're dead. They're gone. But we made this a circus of unbelievable proportion, and his dog and pony show hit me to the core because I know two priests for him to do this to. Why didn't he investigate the public schools or the Boy Scouts, which have a much higher rate of abuse? He said 300 predator pedophile priests. I have a problem with that. Does anybody see a problem with that? Not all 300 were even priests, let alone pedophiles. Several of them were non-priests and laity that were accused within dioceses. I have a bigger problem that he used the term, all of the victims were little boys and girls. This is not true. They were, most of them, post-puberty. That does not make this right. Please understand this. I am not in any way, shape, or form trying to justify this. I'm just saying a 17-year-old boy post-puberty is not a little boy. It's still horrendous. It is still wrong. It is still unacceptable. It is still deplorable. But he's not a little tiny boy who Shapiro said they were, all of them. The conception is that these are all priests and they have been all tried and convicted. He made it sound like they had all been investigated, tried, and convicted. This is not true. There is a huge difference between an accusation and a proven fact. Not all accusations are true. Let me give you a couple points. Almost none of the accusations were verified by the grand jury. None of them. The report was, as you said it, investigative. It was not evidentiary. How do I say it? Evidentiary? Evidentiary. The report's summary suggested that it was authoritative. It is not. Shapiro said that the church had disdain for the victims. Really? Well, maybe you ought to look at the evidence that everybody's attacking Cardinal Wuerl, but you can see where Cardinal Wuerl met individually and counseled every single person that he knew to be a victim. Shapiro threw around the word rape. That's a serious term. If you want to throw around the word rape, you better be doggone well proving your facts. You know what the vast majority of the cases were? Drinking, sexual talk, and viewing pornography. Now, I in no way, shape, or form can imagine a priest drinking or having sexual talk with or viewing pornography with a minor. I can't even comprehend it, but it is not rape. I am not justifying drinking, sex talk, or pornography, but for you to get up there and declare to the world that these priests are raping little boys and girls is terrifying to me. Josh Shapiro said a boy had his mouth washed out with holy water after doing a particular act. But you know what they found out? Two entirely separate investigations. One by a former FBI agent and another by officials at the Vatican examined all the claims against Father Benestad, who Shapiro called out by name, and they determined them completely false. How would you like to be that priest? To have your name announced to the whole world, and the investigation determined he was completely innocent. He's done. They were 100% based on one email that received in the Pennsylvania diocese claiming that the guy just remembered it. That was the whole claim against Father Benestad. The whole claim was a single email. I shudder in fear that anybody can just get on a computer and send an email to my superior and say, I did that. Excuse me for my passion on this. Again, there's no excuse for it. There's also not right that we have to live as priests in this kind of fear. That I have to be fearful to even hear confessions of children because of what somebody might say. That's not right. Neither is right. The abuse is even worse, but this isn't right either. In 2014, the Diocese of Pittsburgh got a claim against Father John Fitzgerald. Shapiro also called his name out to the world. The man who accused him was a criminal, a convicted criminal, and said the priest sexually assaulted him in an airplane and at a chapel at the Pittsburgh International Airport. When the accuser sat down for an interview with the FBI, he, quote, dramatically changed his allegations. Also, the chapel, this is what's really interesting to me. Shapiro announces this priest's name to the whole world that he abused some guy. When they interviewed this guy, which many cases said that was before Shapiro even mentioned his name, the guy said the abuse happened when he was whatever age, 11, 12. And they said that would have been 1983 then, right? And he said, yeah. And they said, are you sure? And he said, yes. So you were 12 years old, and please don't quote me because I don't remember the exact age. It could have been 10, could have been 13. And he said, yes. They said, are you sure? He said, yes. They said, where? He said, in the Pittsburgh Chapel at the International Airport. The Pittsburgh International Chapel had not even been built yet. The Pittsburgh International Chapel had not even been built for years later. This, I'm sorry, is a problem. Flight experts testified that what he said happened in the air could not possibly have been happened because of the positioning of what they described it. No other accusations were ever brought against this priest, against Father John Fitzgerald. I'm sorry, but that's demonic. The grand jury ridiculed bishops for evaluating priests at psychiatric centers and returning them to ministry. The grand jury report ridiculed the bishops for doing this, but you know what? Here's what's interesting. From the 1960s to the 1980s, when this happened, almost everyone who dealt with sexual offenses, not just in the church, but in companies and in schools, they relied on the expertise of those very same psychologists. Those psychologists told the bishops to send them back into ministry in the 60s and 70s. They don't do that today, thank goodness. Now, years ago, bishops were instructed to seek counseling for these priests and return them to ministry. They were instructed by the psychologists, so they did it. Now, if you want to hold a bishop accountable today for what he did in 1960, using 2018 standards that we know today is wrong, that would be equivalent to blaming the doctor who used an archaic form of hip replacement on my grandfather in 1970. Why didn't he use the advanced titanium ball joint, whatever? Well, that's 2018, 2019. So to hold this priest or this bishop accountable in 1960 for the only way that he was instructed to do seems a little unfair. Now, we do not do this with doctors. Why do we do it with priests? Since 2002, the church has completely changed her way of handling abuse cases. There are almost none now active that have happened recently. Almost all the cases were before that. Again, not justifying it. My goodness, the guilty need to pay. The innocent should not. This is a problem for the church. Even our Pope said we should remain silent. There's some truth to this. Was Christ silent before Pilate? Was Christ silent before Pilate? Yes. However, he was innocent. The church is not completely innocent. The church is messed up. The church has done some bad things, and they need to pay the price now. But the point that I want to make here is, don't leave your faith because of it. Again, there's no excuse, there's no reason for this, but I always use the example of my father, who I've said to you before was a military man. And my dad was in Da Nang and helicopters. He's a true blue Marine. He was on the gun drill team, you know, the guys that flip their guns. And I remember I was home in 2002 from North Carolina when the first scandal broke. And I remember my dad, when the news had broke and the papers were out of Boston. And I remember my dad reading through it, and I remember my dad getting angry. My dad's a just man, and he should get angry. And I remember when he finished reading, he slammed his fist down and he said, "That's it. I'm done with the Catholic Church. I'm done. I'm done." And I remember I never talked back to my father, and they always say that the Holy Spirit will give you words to say when needed, and I've never talked back to my father, but out of nowhere the words came to me, and I asked my father, I said, "Dad," and I don't know where the words came from, I said, "But Dad, you're a military man." He said, "Yeah." And I said, You support our military?" He's like, "Of course." I'm like, "Do you support the Army?" "Yeah." "Navy?" "Yeah." "Air Force, Marines?" "Yeah." "Yeah." I said, "Do you believe in what they stand for?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "Do you believe in their mission?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I will remain ever faithful." What does Semper Fi mean? Forever faithful, right? And so he pointed that out. I said, "Well, you know, Dad, you support the military, but do you ever think they haven't had a bad general?" You know, we're from Monroe, Michigan, the home of General George Armstrong Custer. Now, there's a bad general. You know, everything there was Custer. I lived on South Custer Road. I played baseball in the Custer Elementary Baseball League. I ate frozen custard. And everything was Custer. Big statue outside our school window and all that. That was a bad general. You know, Custer never won a major battle against anybody but Indian women and children. He was not a good general, and in fact, that little bighorn, the reason that he got demolished was his pride. Instead of waiting for Reno and Benteen to take on 5,000 Sioux and Cheyenne, he wanted all the glory. So he took his couple hundred men in the 7th Cavalry and engaged the Sioux and the Cheyenne. And he got taken to school. They all died. It would have been a difference if he would have waited for Reno and Benteen, but his ego wouldn't allow it. He marched them right to their death sentence. They were all killed. Dad, there's a bad general. Now, you remember General MacArthur, Dad? We used to go over to Uncle Frank. God bless Uncle Frank. He was my uncle in World War II, lost his arm, blown off by a German mortar cannon. I said, you used to wonder why he couldn't stand to watch General MacArthur on the television. Do you remember that, Dad? My dad was all of a sudden a little silent. And I said, well, Dad, what I remember is you asked Uncle Frank, what do you have against General MacArthur? And Uncle Frank said, there's a bad general. He sent 1,200 men needlessly to their death in Peleliu. Completely unstrategic, needless campaign. It meant nothing to the United States military, but he said the Navy was getting too many headlines. He wanted the headlines. So 1,200 men had to die so that he could get the headlines. That's a bad general. Now, Dad, did you quit the military? Did you give up on the military? Did you criticize and condemn the military because they had some bad generals? Well, the church has had a few bad priests. The church has had a few bad bishops and a few bad cardinals. But you don't give up on her. She's still the Church of Christ. She's human and divine. And in her divineness, she's perfect. In her humanness, she will fail. You know, it was funny, Dad. You remember the story when I was a little kid? When I was 7 and you walked by the table? When I was 7, I announced to my mom that I was going to write a letter to the newspaper ads looking for a new family. Imagine that, right? And God bless my mom, Mother Mary. She sat down at the table with me, helped me draft that letter. And she drafted with me, and she wanted me to tell her all about why I wanted a new family. And I told her, because you like my sister more than me, and because I couldn't play with my friends last weekend. Dad made me work, and you made me go to bed before the football game, Monday night football game. And I gave all the reasons that I wanted a new family. So my mom is just beautifully drafting the letter, and here comes my dad. And my dad says, "What are you doing?" And Mom says, "Chris is writing. I'm helping him write a letter that we're sending to the newspaper because he is looking for a new family." Now, you could imagine my dad's response. So, in credit to him, he looked and he said one thing that I'll never forget. I had shelled a bunch of peanuts. You know, when you're a little kid, that takes quite a bit of effort to shell the peanut and clear those little film off the peanut, you know? And I had shelled the entire pile. I would like to make a whole pile, and then I would eat the peanuts, and I was shelling them. My dad walks by, scoops up the peanuts, eats the peanuts, and says, "You don't change the family God put you into." And he walked away. And it wasn't until years later that I realized the wisdom in that statement. You don't change the family God put you into. And it goes the same with your family here. You are part of this body of Christ. God puts you into this. We don't tell God he was wrong. There was a reason he brought you into this family. There was a reason you're a baptized Catholic. And God is not making mistakes. So, to finish, I think is this. Don't quit the military because of a few bad generals, and don't quit your church because of a few bad priests. You know, this is not just a Catholic problem. If you think it is, sorry. It's a broken humanity problem. What makes it worse for me is no priest should be guilty of this. So anybody can tell me, yeah, Father, that it's way higher than the general population, but you know what? The general population aren't priests. Priests should have a higher standard. If it is 4% in the general population, okay, it's 4%. Priests should be 0. But the point is, in the media, you'll make it think that the priests are 20 times higher than the general population. It's not true. For every one bad priest, statistically, there are 99 good ones. Do you ever hear about them? Not really. Do you know statistically your child is actually safest with a Catholic priest? Statistically? Actually, your child is safer with Catholic priests than anywhere. Way safer than Boy Scouts, way safer than school, way safer than many other religions. But you don't hear about this. So, it's time to do our part. Akita, Fatima, Mary warned against this. Do our first Saturdays. Pray. Pray for, first and foremost, the victims, but pray for those priests. Their souls are in jeopardy. The bride, remember I read this, must resemble her betrothed. We are in the crucifixion phase, and it hurts. You don't think mankind is going to end before mankind goes through the crucifixion? Just like Jesus, the bride must resemble her betrothed. Christ went through his whole life and then was crucified. We have gone through the series of mankind's centuries. We will have to be crucified. Church is in that crucifixion phase. We cannot expect to have Resurrection Sunday without going through the pains of Good Friday. But, Father, are you saying that we should hide this or not talk about it? No, 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 no. This needs to be exposed. I'm not a huge fan of Michael Voris, but I do listen to his stuff. Some of my priest brothers do, some others don't. But I think he's right. It needs to be called out. The scandal is not in the fact that it's been revealed. The scandal is in the fact that it ever happened. And you know what? Like a cut, when you get a cut, you have to expose that wound to the air. or it won't heal. If you wrap it up and hide it, it'll never heal. It has to be exposed. A wound has to be exposed to be purified and healed. And that's what's going on right now in the church. If you were here the other night, I made the point of Our Lady of Good Success. These were apparitions of a nun in Ecuador in 1600 who predicted a spiritual catastrophe in the Catholic Church and in society beginning shortly after the middle of the 20th century. She said there would be widespread moral corruption, not just in the church, but in all of society, profanation of the sacrament of marriage, depraved priests who will scandalize the faithful, and listen to this, and cause suffering for good priests. I got to somehow learn to trust more in God, because right now I consider myself an angry, faithful priest in terms of never having abused a child or anyone. But I've got sin, I've got a ton of faults, and I'm certainly in no position to point a finger. But these priests have scandalized the faithful and caused priests like me and others to pay the price. You know what? That's being like Christ, right? I was in the airport line at Southwest Airlines, and I was reading my Divine Office on my phone, and I wasn't bothering anybody, and a guy comes up to me and he said, "Are you a Catholic priest?" And I said, "Yes, hello." And he said, "Are you a priest?" I said, "Yes, hello." And he said, "Are you a Catholic priest?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Where are you stationed?" And I said, "I'm at the National Shrine of Divine Mercy." And I thought we were going to engage in a nice conversation, and he looks at me and he says, "You mean you don't run a little boys' camp?" This is a stranger. I don't even know him. And I said, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Yeah, it's a well-known fact that every one of you Catholic priests will eventually run a little boys' camp to fulfill your sick sexual desires." And I said, "Sir," I said, "I'm sorry, but you might want to read the Jenkins study out of Penn State, the John Jay report. These are all reports that show that statistically your child is actually safest with a Catholic priest. But you know, it does pain me that there are any priests who are guilty. Even one is too many. Even one." And we exchanged a few more words. He was very cantankerous. And his parting shot to me was, "This never happens in any other religions." If you believe that, you might need to read some of these reports. I was just walking through the airport the other day with a bag in each arm and my backpack on my back. So my backpack on one, I had my vestment bag in one hand and my audio-visual equipment when I don't have screens at particular parishes, and I carry my screen. So I got my hands, and all of a sudden this guy runs and he stops right in front of me. And he says, "Where are you headed?" I thought, well, maybe he wanted me to hear his confession or something, because I always pray every time I go into the airport that if there's anybody who needs confession, please let them not be fearful to ask. So I thought he may be going to ask for confession, and I said, "Well, I'm trying to connect a connector, to Chicago." And he says, "You mean you're not going to Washington, D.C.? And I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "No." I didn't know why he was asking. I said, "No." He says, "Isn't that where all you are going to get your hand slapped for being pedophiles?" And I'm like, "Sir, I'm not a pedophile." I said, "That's the last thing I would do in this world." I said, "I'm not a pedophile." He said, "All of you are pedophiles." He wouldn't let me go forward. I'm running to my connector. Another guy stepped in. I got my hands full. And another guy stepped in to move this guy to let me go through. I tried to step around and he would step around. I would go this way, he would step this way. You know, that's the way it is today. But you know what? That's okay. Christ was innocent. I'm not. I'm guilty of a lot of sin. But not that sin. So we have to pray for those priests who are guilty first and foremost because their souls are in trouble, and then the priests who are also innocent. So finally, to finish, this woman said at Our Lady of Good Success. Listen to this. There will be widespread moral corruption. I said profanation of the sacrament of marriage. Depraved priests will scandalize the faithful and cause suffering of good priests. Unbridled luxury, which will ensnare many souls. Loss of innocence among children and the loss of modesty among women. Lack of priestly and religious vocations. She said the current period of catastrophe will be followed by a period of restoration. It makes a lot of sense. First the crucifixion, then the resurrection. Mother Mariani died in 1635. When they opened her tomb in 1906, she was found to be perfectly incorrupt. This is prophetic in my eyes. So, God bless you all for hearing me out. I apologize if I've upset anybody. I can't emphasize enough, I am not justifying what has happened, and I never will. But I'm just saying two things. It's not only a Catholic problem, and not all priests are pedophiles. I think you guys know that, but the rest of the world doesn't. So let us not be afraid to support our priests, right? Support our church, right? Support our Mother Mary. And most of all, support the victims. They are the ones that need our prayers. They've been hurt, damaged, and this is not excusable. And if any of you out there are guilty of criticizing, I understand. I don't blame you. If you're the ones that have been most constructively criticizing the priests and whatnot, the bishops, I don't blame you. I didn't blame the guy that jumped in front of me. I still don't. He has a right to be angry. But we need prayer. We need prayer, and the church will prevail, right? Amen? Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. You guys have been so amazing putting up with my way long talks. I am going to be saying a homily, mass and a homily about this parish. And so I will record it, and it will be on the website that is listed in your catalogs. It'll be listed, when you get there and go to our website, you'll see my list of talks. And I'm going to dedicate the Mass and the homily to this parish. So look for that, because I want to just announce to the world how wonderful this place is and how great. And I always laugh because a little girl came up to me, she says, "We're one of your 2 favorite parishes?" She wanted to be the number 1. I said, "Well, you call Hudson, Florida, and take it up with them, okay?" So, that's awesome. And so we just had a couple of last announcements. I am going to be doing a blessing for all of you. If you got to go, God bless you. I'm going to do a general blessing for those of you who have to leave with the relic, the first-class relic of St. Faustina. So for those of you who want the general blessing, I'll do that now, and then you can go. But if you want the personal blessing, I will pray over you and your family members, even if they aren't here, and give you a personalized blessing with the relic of St. Faustina. So if you want to join us. Also, too, the baskets are on the table. Again, I know I hate to bring this up, but we don't ask the parish for any money. All we do is rely on the goodness of the hearts of people like yourself. If you can help us with our seminarians, it's a beautiful gift. If you want this tape, this DVD on the table, I think there's still some out there. If you want, you can grab this one even up here if somebody wants it. This has a talk of myself on a lot of the things that I covered here. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And then the catalog, please grab one, because on the back it has the website to hear my talks and the discount to get for any products that you order. Finally, there is food in the, and I said back table, but all the way through into the cafeteria, the Loretto room they call it. Loretto Hall. So these ladies went out of their way to get that food, so make sure you please grab it. Then the parish is doing a consecration to Mary from, Terry, is it March 19th? Right? March 16th? Okay. So 33 days to my good friend Michael Gately, 33 days of merciful love. It's funny because he mentions in the book that I'm the reason he wrote it, because I told him I'm writing the book, and he says, no. I said, you should write it. So he ended up writing it. So it was really beautiful. So get that. And then finally, if you can remember in your prayers, we have a little child here that's part of your family, little baby Sharon. Is anybody familiar with little baby Sharon? Please pray for this little baby. She has some congenital heart condition. She's a member of one of the parish's children here, and what a beautiful family. They got 6 girls, and this little child has a real heart problem, so please keep little baby Sharon in your prayers. We can storm heaven with the prayers, okay? So anyway, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I want to ask for one other prayer. I want to ask my superior to come back next year, so we'll see. We'll see. All right. So I'm going to give a blessing to all you who have to go. The Lord be with you. And through the intercession of Saint Faustina, may Almighty God shed down his mercy upon you and your family, upon all your loved ones, and may Mother Mary wrap her mantle around you through the intercession of her and all the saints, especially Saint Faustina. I bless you and your loved ones, and may God give you healing of any ills of the mind, the body, or the soul. And through her intercession, I bless you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless everybody.